As this is a very large virtual meeting of our greater community of the spiritual family of Brother Charles, we provide you with a few simple tips for a more prayerful gathering. Keep your microphones off at all times. We will have the opportunity of speaking and sharing in a few minutes. Additional instructions will be given in due time. And let's take this opportunity of practicing mindful listening. Brother Charles has many faces and has a very extraordinary and rich history. And our encounters with Brother Charles are actually quite diverse. He represents many things to each and every one of us in the greater family. We're all deeply united with a common spirituality of a divine love in the encounter and universal brotherhood. This is our rich heritage, which we use today and will serve us for tomorrow. Today, we have the privilege of welcoming two extraordinary women, each with their personal and professional experiences with Brother Charles, and they will share with us their rich experience. I'll have the opportunity of presenting both of these individuals in a few moments. Perhaps a brief overview of today's virtual gathering. I'll be presenting the first speaker. The first speaker will speak. I will then present the second speaker, after which she will be speaking. We will then have a guided and yet informal period of questions and sharing of the greater community, followed by a final prayer by Father Lenny Tai, and we will all unite our voices and hearts for the prayer of abandonment. I have taken the last place, jokes aside. My name is Chiro. I'm from the lay fraternity in Montreal, Canada. And on behalf of the organizing committee, I've been asked to moderate this virtual meeting. For our first speaker, it really gives me an extraordinary privilege to introduce you, someone that you know already very well. This is little Sister Kathy McKee. Little Sister Kathleen entered the Little Sisters of Jesus in Montreal in 1981. She spent many years in Rome working in formation, helping young sisters get better acquainted with Brother Charles and to deepen his message in the light of the Bible. She has also published a book published by New City called The Universal Brother, Charles de Foucauld Speaks to Us Today. At present, she lives in a small fraternity with two other little sisters in Walsingham, England. Without any further ado, I now leave the virtual stage to little Sister Kathy, who will now speak to us for about 20 or 25 minutes, after which I will be returning for the presentation of the second speaker. Thank you all, and thank you, Kathy.
So I'm very happy to be able to share with you the life of Brother Charles. I'm in Rome right now to be doing this sharing. So I need to have the screen sharing.
Coming.
Right. So, Brother Charles is someone who points us to Jesus and his gospel. Charles de Foucauld was born September 15th, 1958, in Strasbourg, a city on the French-German border, a city which will revert to German nationality after the Franco-Prussian War. So his life is marked by this war, and it's also marked by a vigorous colonial expansion by some European powers. France's occupation of Algeria began 30 years before his birth, will go on throughout his lifetime, and will only end in 1962. So that will mark his story. And when Brother Charles speaks of fraternity, his message was not born in the quiet of some peaceful oasis, but on the fault lines of humanity in the 19th century. His father's family was of old French nobility. He worked in forest management, where he probably contracted Lyme's disease, born with this little tick, which probably got under skin, caused an infection and may have led to the mental breakdown that he experienced when Charles was 4 years old. The father was sent off to Paris to a psychiatric institute where he would die 2 years later. His mother, by then he has a younger sister, was so distressed at her husband's illness that she returned to live with the grandfather. But there she too falls ill. The doctor will write neuralgia on her death certificate, and she in fact dies shortly before her husband, leaving the two children orphans by the time they are 6.5. Her dying words will be, "My God, may your will be done." Words that will be etched on her tombstone. Can make you think about those words that are in the prayer of abandonment. What do they mean? He is brought up by his grandfather, and relatives remember him as being a rather spoiled child who would have benefited from a firmer upbringing, even though he loved his grandfather. At 15, he is sent to boarding school in Paris to improve his marks. It's an unhappy time, one where he loses his faith. He would later blame it on the reading he did. I was so free, so young. The spirit of his time is marked by rationalism. And he says, the equal faith with which one could believe such different religions disproved them all. He managed to scrape together enough marks to get into Saint-Cyr, a training school for officers. But most of his letters speak of his boredom. As a young officer, he was sent to a town called Pont-à-Mousson to guard the French-German border. There, he met a young woman that biographers refer to as Mimi, who would become his mistress and would later follow him to Algeria. His commanding officer demanded that he get rid of her, and his refusal would cause his dismissal from the army. But having returned to France with Mimi, he heard that his regiment was involved in active combat and begged to be reinstated, promising that he would have nothing further to do with her. Active duty will be completely different from life in the barracks that bored him. He becomes a different man, and it is the beginning of a change where he discovers that difficulty brings out the best in him. But once active duty ends, he decides to leave the army. He doesn't want to waste his life doing something that bores him, so he wants to go traveling. At first, he thinks of going exploring. Well, hearing that he's left his army, that he's again left the army, his family gets worried because he has inherited a lot of money with his grandfather's death, and they are afraid that he's going to waste all that money, and they place him under a legal counsel. Perhaps out of a need to prove himself, he decides to undertake a perilous exploration of Morocco. He goes disguised as a wandering Jewish rabbi with a true Moroccan Jew as his guide. It's a reconnaissance, an expedition where he will map out parts of Morocco where no European had ever been able to enter. In Morocco, he will be marked by the expression of faith he will encounter, particularly among Muslims. He will spend several years writing up an account of his journey to Morocco that will earn him a gold medal from the Parisian Geographical Society. But by then, another exploration has become acute, an inner search for meaning. The return to France is marked by a return to his family, who by then have lifted the legal counsel against him. And his cousin Marie will play an important role in awakening his faith. He will recall that it's not by her words that she preached, but by her life. It's a time when he reads a lot of books, and he says that he only feels peaceful when he goes inside churches, repeating what he calls a strange prayer. My God, if you exist, let me know you. He is someone who prayed before he believed. He will have an important conversation with his cousin where he says, I envy you because you believe. I am searching for the light and I cannot find it. And she will answer him, is searching by yourself the proper way to go about it? And she points out to him Father Huvelin. Charles will go looking for Father Huvelin, asking him for religion lessons. But Father Huvelin was a very intuitive man, and he could guess that his intellectual search had gone on for long enough. He didn't need any more information about religion, but he needed an encounter. And so he invited him point blank to take part in the sacrament of reconciliation. Brother Charles never says why he accepted that invitation, nor what he said, but it is the moment that illumines his whole life. And it's from that moment that springs his logo, Jesus Caritas, Jesus love. It's in his brokenness, it's as a sinner that he met God.
Wow.
Knowing his talents as an explorer, and in order to consolidate his faith, Father Huvelin will suggest that he go on pilgrimage to the Holy Land. He is 30 years old. He will start by Bethlehem and Jerusalem, but his pilgrimage to Nazareth will leave a lasting impression on him. If in Morocco he had discovered that God was greater, Allah Akbar, in Nazareth he meets God who took the lowest place in Jesus of Nazareth. For him, it is a shock and a call. His vocation is to take the last place. When he returns to France, his family and Father Huvelin want him to marry a good Catholic girl, but he won't hear of it. He says, from the moment I believed in God, I knew that I could not do otherwise than to live for God alone. But it will, in fact, take him a long time to find his vocation. He will begin by joining the Trappists, a congregation that seems to him to live Nazareth through their silence, prayer, and manual work. He will request to be sent to their daughter house in Syria because it is poorer. But in spite of that, the poverty of an institution can never measure with his conception of Nazareth. He will say, for rich people we are poor, but poor people don't see us as being poor. After 7 years, he leaves the Trappists. It's a moment of real crisis, and he returns to Nazareth, where the original inspiration had been born, living in a garden shed on the property of Poor Clare sisters, who hire him as their workmen, but in fact, he mostly just lives as a hermit. It's a time of intense meditation of the scriptures. He writes his meditations in order to remain focused. And in fact, 80 or 90% of his meditations come from this short 3.5 years in Nazareth. He dreams of starting a congregation that will share Jesus's life of Nazareth, and he calls his dream congregation the Hermits of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And he writes up a rule that is based on 3 principles: imitation of Jesus's hidden life at Nazareth, adoration of the Blessed Sacrament where Jesus is present, and establishment in a land of mission. But in order to begin a congregation, he would need to be a priest. He had always rejected that idea as being contrary to taking the last place. But he decides to go and present himself and his rule to the Patriarch of Jerusalem. He's dressed in a very odd way when he gets there, and he seems, in fact, like a holy nutcase, and he will be dismissed. He has no choice but to return to France, and there his old friends, the Trappists, will receive him for a year to prepare him for ordination. He will be ordained for the Diocese of Viviers, but remains free to work outside the diocese. During the retreat before his ordination, he will change the name of his dream congregation. It will no longer be the Hermits of the Sacred Heart, but the Little Brothers of the Sacred Heart. The accent is now on being a brother, and the destination has changed. He will not return to the place where the land is holiest, but he will go where souls are in the greatest needs. And he remembers the destitute people of the Sahara he had met in his youth. He will go there as a contemplative in a mission setting. He wants to be a second heart through which the Sacred Heart will shine out on people through his being their brother. Charles will revive his acquaintance with certain French officers to obtain permission to settle in the Algerian Sahara, as close as possible to the Moroccan border, which remains a closed country. He settles in Beni Abbes, where he builds a fraternity of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, a small monastery in the hope that other little brothers will join him. But no one, in fact, does. He had chosen to found his congregation in a place where he would never find recruits. His fraternity is built on 3 icons: Nazareth life, a life of the poor, of prayer, and of manual workers. In this picture, maybe you can't see very well, but Brother Charles has a hoe over his shoulder. There's also the idea of fraternity, being a brother to all, whether it is the slave child or the officer. He wants to be another Jesus. He wants Jesus's heart to shine out through him. And the 3rd icon that directs his life is the visitation, crying the gospel, not with his words, but with his life. He has only been in Beni Abbes 3 years when a friend, General Laperine, will ask him to come with him on a fraternization tour among the Tuareg people of the South Sahara, who have recently been conquered. He knows that a man of God will have more influence among the Tuaregs than any display of military strength. Charles is reluctant to leave Beni Abbes that he has only just built. But difficulty and challenge always brought out the best in him. Jesus in the Eucharist has never been brought to the people living in these far-flung reaches of the Sahara, and so he sets off. But a fraternization tour will inevitably lead to his settling among the Tuaregs in 1905. In his eyes, they are the furthest away, the most abandoned, therefore those to whom he must go. He builds his hermitage in Tamanrasset. It's a much more modest installation than Beni Abbes. He says that he will live there alone with Jesus, alone for Jesus. He wants to be a fraternal presence in the heart of the desert, crying the gospel with his life. Earlier, he had hesitated about where to build his hermitage. On top of a rocky outcrop, far away from people, or at the crossroads, which would mean being at the mercy of visitors. But he seems to hear a voice say to him, "It is love that is to recollect you in me, not distancing yourself from my children. See me in them, and like me in Nazareth, live among them, lost in God." In order to prepare the way for future missionaries, he begins compiling a French Tuareg lexicon. But his fascination with their language would involve him in a lifelong work of listening and deciphering their language. And he discovers that listening is the first part of evangelizing. The precious document he left behind is a memorial to a way of life that was fast disappearing as French occupation went on. Towards the end of his life, Brother Charles became increasingly distressed by the oppressive turn colonization was taking in Algeria. France was aggressively pursuing its own political and economic interests, rather than helping foster any real development. He will make 3 trips to France in an attempt to begin a group that would sensitize lay and religious people to take the interests of these disadvantaged people to heart. It's moving to see the letters that his Tuareg friends wrote to him while he was in France. But World War I would put a halt to his plans. In the Sahara, the Senussia, a Muslim brotherhood, saw its chance to push back European invaders. In an attempt to protect the local population from invaders, Brother Charles built a small kasbah, something he'd seen in Morocco, where the local people could protect their harvest from raiders and seek shelter in case of an attack. And Charles was asked by the local people to move in. December 1st, 1916, members of the Senussia came to his Borj at nightfall. They had in their company a man who knew Charles's habits and pretended to be the postman. He knocked, and as Brother Charles stretched out his hand in greeting, it was seized and he was dragged out. 20 minutes later, he would be shot dead. The bullet that went through his head left its mark in the wall. 3 other Arab soldiers perished in the same ambush. It is perhaps not surprising that he was not to appear before the face of God without the company of his Muslim brothers. In 1927, in spite of his written request to be buried where he died, his mortal remains were transferred to El Golea, where there was a small Christian community. Although we have declared him venerable, blessed, and now saint, he remains first and foremost our brother.
Little Sister Kathy, thank you so much. That was an extraordinary, really succinct and comprehensive overview of the journey of Brother Charles and his legacy. Thank you very much. At this point, thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to take the opportunity of introducing our second and final speaker, Rosemary Peters-Hill, who is an associate professor in the Department of French Studies at Louisiana State University, where she teaches mostly 19th century literature and cultural studies. She first met Brother Charles de Foucauld in 2003, shortly after completing her dissertation. When she desperately sought anything else to read, a friend loaned her a biography of this most untraditional monk, and her curiosity about the unwritten parts of Brother Charles' life led her to study and eventually translate his infamous Reconnaissance au Moroc into English in a critical edition with copious annotations and footnotes. Through Brother Charles, Dr. Peters-Hill also discovered Morocco, both pre-colonial, the uncharted country of Foucault's time, and post-colonial, an ever-evolving place in which memory is long, identity is multi-layered, and space is sacred. Her translation of this work was actually published in September 2020 by Anthem Press. Without any further ado, I now leave the virtual podium to Rosemary.
Thank you so much, Tiro. Good morning, everybody. And can I share my screen also, please?
You have the co-hosting powers.
Thank you so much. Now let me find, sorry. Okay, here we go. Let's do this screen.
Meeting us.
So can you just confirm that you can give me a thumbs up or something if you can see the upside down map of the world?
All very clear.
All right, thank you. So as Tiro already announced, we are a truly international audience. So I will repeat good morning, afternoon, and evening. And thank you so much for the honor of speaking with you this morning about our beloved Brother Charles. I'm very grateful for the invitation to share some of my work on parts of his hidden life long before Nazareth. And as little Sister Kathleen has shown us, Catherine, I'm sorry, has shown us, Brother Charles lived his own Nazareth, quote, as an early period of public deeds and misdeeds, but accompanied by an inner hiddenness that would only manifest when he left everything he had known. So I'm not going to repeat much of his biography, really not any of his biography, since we've had such a beautiful introduction to that. But I am going to focus on the work that he did in Morocco and how it later influenced him as a convert, as a missionary, and an unusual missionary, and as a writer. And so I want to start by saying that I am not a historian. I'm a literary scholar. I'm even less of a theologian. So when I first read Charles de Foucauld, I was very much at a loss. And, I knew something in his life and writings was calling to me, but it seemed like all the biographies had already been written. I didn't know what I could possibly add to that. And I didn't see yet how I, as a literary scholar, could bring what I do to a text that was so non-literary, seemingly non-literary. So I spent some years reading and rereading and diving through all the biographies and getting more acquainted with Brother Charles and his life and his spirituality, and came to understand that the more I got to know him, the more I saw what I do in his work, which I hope is not just egotistical projection, but an actual, reflection of the fact that this was a man who knew how to use language to reach people and to communicate what his soul was living, whether in his civil and soldier period or in his hermit and missionary period. And so when I look at his life now, I don't look at it along the traditional lines, which most of biographies reflect as, early sinner and later saint with, a sort of easy breach right down the middle, but as one continuum with the seeds of the later sanctity that he lived out in Tamanrasset, very evident and planted in those early years, especially in Morocco and the time after, but even before that. Okay, let's see, going forward. Okay, all right. So the Reconnaissance, if you are aware of it, has three beginnings, really, depending on which version you read. It was very, generally speaking, a travel narrative, travel memoir of the time he spent in Morocco. But it's more complicated than that, as even just the presentation of the text can show. So the travel narrative starts with Foucault's very straightforward, I disembarked in Tangiers on the 20th of June, 1883. Okay. And depending on the edition you read, there's both an avant-propos and an introduction before that, each of which discusses Foucault's connections with traveling and his gratitude, which in French is also reconnaissance, to the people who helped him in Morocco. And before either of those, there's a lengthy letter to his cousin, François de Bondy, to whom he imparts all manner of intimate information that he can't include in the version for publication. Okay. And so I focused here on his famous line, perhaps infamous line about, becoming an explorer, where he says he chose the disguise that would abase him, feeling that it would make his work easier. And the fact that this idea occurs in scripture many times, most remarkably in Luke 14:11, whoever raises himself up shall be brought down, and whoever lowers himself shall be raised up. And so that is his, I don't think he had the idea that he would be raised up, but he certainly used the scriptural connection to reflect what his work would be in the country. So, and as I said there, so the beginning of Charles de Foucault's journey toward universal brotherhood happens by accident, in a way, when his first contact with the Jewish community elicits his companion Morroco's story about their reason for trying to gain access into the dangerous territory of the Rif Mountains. Okay, and I'm quoting from Foucault, quoting Mardoché. Okay, for 2 years, a domestic difficulty had troubled his happiness. His wife had a younger brother whom she adored. He had always lived with her and had joined her under her husband's roof. But 2 years ago, after an argument with Mardoché, the young man had left the house, and they had not seen nor received news of him since. And this is from the letter to François de Bondy on the 13th of June, 1883. So the name that Mardoché gives to this invented brother-in-law is Judah Sefertani. Okay. So I've spent some time with the names that Charles de Foucauld adopted in both civil and religious life. Frère Marie Albéric, for example, is his name as a Trappist in Notre-Dame-des-Neiges, a combination of both the Virgin Mary, the Theotokos, and one of the founders of the Cistercian order, Saint Albéric. Rabbi Joseph Aleman, the name he adopted in disguise for his exploration in Morocco, is both the name of Saint Joseph and paired with a kind of ambiguous, overdetermined name that might, in Arabic, mean German, Aleman, or else truth, Liman. Okay? And then, of course, he reinvents himself again, according to his vocation, as Brother Charles of Jesus. So he kind of goes to Jesus through Mary, right? And here, in the midst of literally an alchemical debate in this early episode, Mardochée uses the name Judah Sephartani. So Judah was the southern kingdom of Israel after the division following the death of Saul. The kingdom of Judah was led by the house of David, and its capital was Jerusalem. And Sephartani can be broken into two parts. So Sephar and Tani, the suffix, which we can recognize from Christ's words on the cross, right? Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Why have you abandoned me? And Tani means do this to me. Okay. And Zafar is a book, okay? Or Sefer, I guess, without the French inflection. So this fictional youth brother-in-law has a name that suggests both the city of David and the process of being made into a book, okay? Or in other words, being converted. Okay? At the very beginning of Foucault's explorations, his narrative offers a clue to the path he will walk, becoming a person of the book of the house of David. Okay? For Brother Charles, in the beginning was the book, this book, the Reconnaissance, and in this book was his beginning. Sorry, my computer is making a strange noise and it's going kind of slowly, so I'm going to try to just go through these. Okay, so speaking of some literary antecedents, we have his contemporary, basically, Arthur Rimbaud, who was, if not the most famous, at least one of the most famous poets, sometime poets of the 19th century, who wrote this odd phrase in a couple of letters in 1871, Je et un autre. Okay. If you're familiar at all with French language and grammar, you'll recognize the error right away. But Rimbaud does it very intentionally to say that the work of poetry is to destabilize the person, the subject, okay? One becomes a seer, he says, through a long, immense, and thoroughly reasoned unsettling of all the senses. Okay, I just want to keep this at the back of our minds for a moment. Okay. Here we go. So then we have the idea of Foucault as a seer. And now I found this picture on the internet, I will admit. I'm not sure that it's actually Charles de Foucauld using one of his astrological instruments, because I don't think the photography from the time would have been quite sophisticated enough to render this image. And also, I don't know who would have been photographing him. So, take it with a grain of salt, but it's supposed to be him, according to this one website I found. So there, I sound like one of my students. Okay, so Foucault as an artist, okay? He had military training. And in that military training, from the very beginnings of the École Militaire in France, drawing was heavily emphasized as part of the curriculum, okay? Because it offered possibilities for navigation, exploration, and recording the landscape and coastline in order to communicate what the terrain looked like to the military at large. So other additional troops who were coming in, or a future invading colonial force, for example. So he knew what he was doing with a pencil. Okay. And brings us to this little quotation from a gentleman who's written about military drawing. It says, drawings made during mobile reconnaissance are used to record intelligence about enemy positions and terrain there. It's very small for me. And so I just put this little sketch that Foucauld did. Okay, this is Bourjad, where he actually makes one of his best friends during the exploration. And this is a mobile reconnaissance drawing. Okay, getting acquainted with the terrain. Let's see where. Okay. Panoramas, on the other hand, and this is back to Paul Goff, okay, are made from a static position, usually an elevated vantage point that commands an uninterrupted view. They're vital for indicating targets and determining range and arc of fire. And so I put in this image of Chefchaouen, okay, which is one of the places that Foucault spent more time than he had planned to, since he arrived in Morocco at the very beginning of Ramadan and couldn't actually travel for a month. So he did these sort of side excursions, field trips. And you can see, like, he is at a distance from the city of Chefchaouen, and he's recording all of the details around it. And he saw this, my interpretation of this particular image, because it's one of the 4 that he makes into a photogravure, an etching, not just a sketch in the book. But this particular image shows that he knew that Chefchaouen was going to be an important point of entry in order to get some kind of control. It's in the Reef Mountains. Okay? So he knew that this was a dangerous territory that needed some bigger exploration. So we have mobile reconnaissance and panoramas, and that brings me to seeing Morocco and making Morocco seen. Okay, this is, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what France thought of North Africa at this time in its history. And for example, this is a mid-19th century, late 19th century photograph of a, quote, Berber woman. So there's a certain amount of Orientalism, okay? And Orientalism, which I'm using in quotation marks, was a movement in France that began as early as the 16th century, actually, when Francois Ier, Francis I, sought an alliance with the Ottoman Empire. Okay? And so he had things brought back from geographically the Orient. Okay? By the 19th century, Orientalism had become a way of seeing whatever was not French or familiar as exotic. Orientalism therefore included actual Eastern places from Egypt, India, and Thailand to other, quote, Orients like Spain, Martinique, and Texas. Okay. Following the French conquest of Algiers in 1830, North Africa became the object of manifold fascinations, representations, and stereotypes. And that brings us to how the French saw North Africa. Okay. For example, Eugène Delacroix, in his famous painting, Les femmes d'Alger dans leur appartement, Women of Algiers in their apartment. And this was in the days before widespread photography. So the French public was familiar with North African spaces and traditions through visual arts on either grand or humble scales. Okay. Delacroix famously represented this taboo view of a purely feminine interior. And Edmund Aubrey Hunt, who is the other painter here, this is Arab Fantasia #1, okay, was just one 19th century painter among several to depict a fantasia, which is a stylized horseplay, not like horseplay, but you know, like a presentation using horses meant to reenact a cavalry experience of battle. Okay, it's very performative and very festive. Okay. Which brings us to, okay, so I'm telling you, keep this in your mind, right, that that we're unsettling all the senses, and that Foucault knew what, how to appeal to the readership of his time, okay? And I'm gonna read you a section from Honoré de Balzac, from the Père Goriot, okay? The recent invention of the diorama, which took optical illusions a degree further than the panorama, had given rise to a running joke among the art students to end every word with Rama. Well, Monsieur Poiret, how is your health, Rama? There's an uncommon froze-orama outside. Aha, here is a magnificent soup-orama. I beg your pardon, sir. It is a soup of cabbage. Okay. It's a lot less funny in English, but it's one of the greater moments in the Gregorio. And this using the panorama as a kind of image in the Reconnaissance shows Foucauld as a seer. Okay, he's a visionary, literally. He's a canny sketch artist who intuits how to place Morocco on the pages of his book, destined for the French military. Okay. But also destined for a readership in France that would not necessarily have the experience of looking at North Africa in any way other than the exotic. Okay. So by making these sketches, and specifically the panoramas that are very detailed, he shows that the space of North Africa can be understood beyond its borders, and that it can be understood according to European, or specifically French, ways of seeing. And he uses the panorama as a social event. Now, it was a big thing in 1820s Paris, and spectators would walk into a large circular oval building whose walls would actually turn. There was a mechanism that made them rotate, and they were covered in a 360-degree view of some place, some exotic place. So he knew how to use this cultural knowledge to bring his readers with him to a country they had never seen in reality. Okay. Then here we go, Foucault's sketches. As I said, they offered the French reading public a different way to conceive of North African space, and they used techniques and visual tropes that were familiar in French popular culture. Okay. So the sketches, I'm sorry, going back a second, the sketches in Reconnaissance create another possibility for Morocco as a space not othered. It's a place of defined angles and planes, walls and windows and animals. And this is, again, this is Chef Shawan. I'm not going to take the time because time is limited, but there's another image of Tikert, where if you zoom in on the sketch, the drawing, it's incredible the level of detail. And he actually brings people and gestures into what he represents. Okay. This landscape by Théodore Géricault repeats it shows the kind of thing that Foucault may have modeled his intensely detailed panorama drawings on. Okay. He uses trends and techniques familiar in French popular culture, not just the diorama and panorama, not just a happening, but the ways he shades and contours the sketches he includes. The most elaborate, like the photogravures here, the etchings of Chef Shawan, Tikert, and Tissint, I think I'll look that up. They imitate lines, shapes, and perspective effects of romantic painting. For example, in this landscape by Théodore Géricault. And that brings us to part of Foucault's visual narrative lies in this evocation of other narratives, stories specific to the unique places and spaces he encounters. Okay. Tazgadit is one such place. Located in the south, it's home to what Foucault described as, quote, object of 1,000 legends. Okay. He begins by describing the current state of the ruins, punctuated with conjectures about the former appearance of the structure. For example, quote, the ramparts, thick, must have been made of stonework at their base, adobe in the upper sections. This hillside transforms abruptly into a vertical wall in which open the mouths of several caves, an ancient citadel and caverns. And he goes on from there to say that the ancient citadel and caverns indicate that the local population believes that it was inhabited by Christians. And just the fact of a citadel and caverns is enough to convince them that Christians live there. And he's a little, skeptical about this. But having established the scientific details of the locale, Foucault allows himself to entertain a local legend. Okay? Many centuries ago, 3 princesses, daughters of a Christian king, reigned in these regions. One, Dula Bentouad, lived in this fortress of Tazgadit. Another, Zelfa bint Wad, lived in a similar one on the banks of the Asif Marian near Tessaout. The third, Stuka bint Wad, yet another similar one in Tazkukt on the Wed Imini. The Muslims made war on the three Christian princesses for a long time and ended up chasing them away. So even though he mostly dismisses the story of this place as, quote, history written in books nobody could show me, but whose content is in everyone's memory, he's clearly charmed with the place and gives the princesses fortresses and precise locations. Gives the princesses fortresses, precise locations, and even, the space in his narrative to characterize their lives and their histories. Okay, so we're coming back out of into writing. Okay, writing as a subversive act. Okay. Writing for Foucauld posed a constant danger while he was under exploration. And that is another reason why that picture of Foucauld with his instrument in the beginning is so doubtful, let me say. Because if he was caught writing, they would know that he wasn't there just looking for a brother-in-law or getting acquainted with the Jewish communities of Morocco, but was actually doing reconnaissance, military reconnaissance. Right? Then there's also the question of observing the Sabbath. And the choice of adopting the disguise as a rabbi meant that he had to do what a rabbi would do. So he ate what they ate, he lived as they lived, whether in rich dwellings or in squalor in some places, and he practiced the religious observances that they did. So for example, on the 7th of July, he writes, "Today is Saturday. I must stay put for 24 hours. I must not be surprised in the act of writing. My secret would be betrayed and all would know that I am not a real Jew." Okay. And there's a section in the middle of that I took out because it was a little long, but also because it's one of those uncomfortable moments where he says, I can't imagine a more inconvenient thing than being Jewish, because I would lose 52 days a year to having to be quiet and just, worship, basically. There's a little irony for later. Okay, but then we come to the, this is in the end of chapter 4, as he enters the Sahara. Okay. The moon, shining in a cloudless sky, casts a sweet light. The air is warm, without even a breath to trouble it. In the profound tranquility, surrounded by this elfin nature, I reach my first shelter in the Sahara. One can understand in the contemplation of nights like this one, the Arabs' belief in a mysterious night, the Layl al-Qadr, in which the sky half opens, angels descend to the earth, the waters of the sea become sweet, and everything inanimate in nature bows down to adore its creator. From the 13th of November, 1883. Okay. This is the most lyrical expression we get from Foucauld about his experience in Morocco. A lot of translation in this particular work meant researching things like hydrogeology of North African areas and learning different kinds of rock formations and fortresses. And then there's a lot of riverbeds, a lot of riverbeds of various widths and depths and materials making them up. And then this was like a breath, literally a breath. And the funny thing for me is, so Layl al-Qadr is the 27th night of Ramadan. And if we have experts in Islam in the group, forgive me if I'm getting something wrong, but it is the night when the heavens are supposed to open up. And so observant Muslims spend most of the night in prayer. When we lived in Morocco, when I was researching Foucauld, we were there during Ramadan, and on that 27th night, sure enough, the mosques stayed open all night, and the people just crowded around. As many as could get inside were inside and just prayed and sang all night long. It was amazing, so beautiful. So you can see how this would be something that would kind of take him, that surprise him with the beauty of it. And this is not a man who really showed a belief in the presence of the creator until this moment. Okay, and then begins his period in the desert. Okay, And I want to talk quickly about the poem that he quotes, which is the L'Obélisque de Luxor by Théophile Gautier, okay? The Obelisk of Luxor. There were two of them on the Temple of Luxor. The Western obelisk was given to France in 1830 and re-erected in 1836 on the Place de la Concorde. Okay, in exchange, France gave Egypt a mechanical clock. Time for time, I guess. So Foucauld entered the Sahara for the first time on the 13th of November, 1833. And here is the quatrain of what he quotes, okay? Up above the naked earth, the sky, a desert of azure, where never floats a cloud, is vast, implacable, pure. Okay. What he quotes is où jamais ne flotte une nue. Le ciel autre désert d'azur où jamais ne flotte une nue. Okay. So he's quoting Gautier, who is a romantic poet and novelist, very well known. And Gautier evoked the kind of loss involved in having to stay in an unmodernized setting, which the other obelisk has to do. It's the obelisk who's speaking. This is his twin. Okay. And so I see this first perception of the Sahara as Charles de Foucault's divided consciousness. Okay, he's beginning to become somebody else. From a perturbed adolescence, the necessity of disguising himself, and the feeling of a kind of twin self that separates the person he was from the person he has yet to become, they all find an echo in the Luxor poem. Foucault quotes only a piece of one stanza, but that stanza is a metonymy for the whole experience of displacement, detached observation, imperial glory and collapse, and subjectivity acknowledging its lack. Okay. Then there's the, I know there are some Foucault experts in the crowd who are probably familiar with his early letters from boarding school to his friend Gabriel Tourde, and his signature, which has a kind of shade of torment to it, where he signs nu, nu / nue, comma, nu / nue, nu, going back and forth between masculine and feminine, or the idea of nakedness and the idea of a cloud. Okay. And he chooses that line with pas une nue, okay, as kind of maybe a response to whatever that choice was that he felt in that signature. He chooses the cloud, or he chooses the nakedness. Okay. Once he enters the sacred space of the Sahara, the cloud self, the nu, nue, integrates with the self he's discovering. And Foucault, I said the obelisk writing the poem is the one that remained in Egypt. It's nostalgic and mourning both the loss of its twin and the fact that it is left behind in the old country, the exotic space. For Foucault, the old country is France, and the quote exotic space is the new place for him. Okay, the old country from the standpoint of the poem. So his dawning self-recognition on foreign soil suggests Morocco as a sort of deserta rasa, if you want, the utopia for a new identity. He has stepped through the mirror into the disguise he once joked about. The second level of divided selfness comes through the fact that at the time of composing his narrative, Foucault had already begun the process of conversion or reversion, if you like, and was steeped in Catholic doctrine through his spiritual work with Abbé Uvelin. So as he writes his memory of those first steps into the desert, he's also living as a Christian, knowing he's called to greater purpose. Okay? The writing itself, the act of putting his memories onto the page, takes him deeper into his conversion. And he uses his formal education from his youth, from his totally non-practicing, and in fact, like as little sister Kathy pointed out, the like a loss of faith youth, to find words to describe the blessing of this wilderness and the grace that's going to come from it. Okay. Okay, come back. And the last my last section, I believe, here, if it will let me arrive there. There we go. Okay. Is othering. Okay. And I have these two quotations from these are from the letter to Francois de Bondy, but they're from the first days, like when he is first in disguise as a Jew, as a rabbi. He's boarding the train. He's, waiting to leave Orhan for Morocco. And he says, "What a strange establishment is this hotel. I had a moment of surprise hearing myself tutoyed by the valet. In Algeria, Jews are addressed with the informal tu." Okay. And then at around 5 o'clock in the evening, we climb into the mail coach and leave for Tlemcen. As I step toward the car, I hear a passerby say to his neighbor, indicating me with a gesture, "Do you know where all that comes to us from? That comes here straight from Jerusalem." Now, as Brother Charles, Foucault will often mention la chère dernière place, right? This dear last place. So how fitting that he was summarily assigned to it in the first days of his exploration. The use of tu at the hotel establishes Foucault's status as a social inferior. Okay. More pointedly, the that of the remark he reports as he boards the train goes beyond just social inferiority and places Foucault in the category of things. In just 24 hours, he's gone from, the wealthy son of aristocrats to a lower caste of human to an object. Okay. And for the first time in his life, Foucault is definitively marked as a member of the underclass, a class held in popular contempt, marginalized and vilified by others, including his former military colleagues, who see him eating olives in the square in his disguise, and they do not recognize him. Okay. And also including his former self, because that would have been him. Okay. Okay. And we're going back out to Campbell. And that leads me to basically the end of this presentation, which I hope is still just a beginning for further work on Charles de Foucauld. And I thank you for your attention. I saw a couple of raised hands, but we're saving questions, I think, for after the speakers. So I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thierry.
Thank you so very much, Rosemary, for sharing with us a rather refreshing perspective of the life of Brother Charles. And we could definitely see how that had an impact on the evolution of the man as he embarked into his spiritual journey in southern Algeria. Wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. At this point in time, we are now all on our screens, virtually united around this virtual table. We have about 15 or 20 minutes in front of us for specific questions or pointed comments on any aspect that you may have heard from little Sister Kathy or from Rosemary herself. Not all at once, because it's rather challenging to moderate conversations and have many people. I do see two valiant individuals with their hands up already. Fidelis has been having his hand up for a while, and then Father Fabian. I don't know who was first. And the final point I'd like to indicate, if you have a comment or a question, I kindly ask that you indicate that in the chat box if that's a possibility, or if you can simply raise your virtual hand on Zoom, and I'll do the very best I can to pick on you at the right time. Is that okay? Thank you very much for your goodwill to work together on this. So Father Fabian, why don't we start with you? And there he went. It's all good. Brother Fidel, oh, Father Fabian, did you want to, no. Okay. Brother Fidelis, did you have a comment or a question that you would like to share? Your smile is all we need. No worries. Is there anybody else around the virtual table that would like to comment on anything that we've heard, or would like to share a personal experience that's directly related with what you've heard today, either to little Sister Kathy or to Rosemary Peters-Hill. Don't be shy, we're all part of the family. Oh, I see. Yes, I have been given the very important and wise advice that if you wish to speak or to ask a question, to please unmute yourself. That goes without saying, but thank you for reminding me, Anne.
Zero?
Yes, my brother John, brief comment or brief question. Thank you.
Absolutely. On the literary side, oh my goodness gracious, sister, it was, I was struck by the objectifying, feeling objectified. In our small US community, we're always asking the question, who is our Tuareg? How do we identify those to whom we are ministers of presence, right? And in the US, I find we objectify anything that is marginalized. And yet I no longer find marginalized as the appropriate term, but the objectified. I had a wonderful woman who came to my house one day, and there was a homeless guy spending the night on my front porch. And she looked at me and she said, "Is that a homeless?" And at that moment in space and time, I went, holy cow. You know, it's all of us that at one time or another have been objectified to, is that a? Mm-hmm. That then becomes the Tuareg for me, I would suggest. Thank you.
That's a beautiful observation, and absolutely. And I think that I wouldn't suggest that it was entirely ego motivated for Charles de Foucauld, but I think that having had the experience of being a that for somebody else. Now, Moroccan society is very highly stratified, and the Jews are actually not the lowest of the low in the society, believe it or not. But having been the lowest of the of one kind of low, it opened him more to the experience of that kind of objectification and being cast aside, being seen as not worthy of attention or I don't know, food, prayer, respect, dignity as a human being. So
thank you, John. Thank you, Rosemary.
A follow-up, please.
Brief follow-up, John.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Then to identify those moments that I have been objectified and hence can be the Tuareg for another. As a gay man, I'm always identified as a gay. I've always been offended, rightfully so, I would imagine. But at the same time, if someone can see me other than and humanize me again in their mind, I think that there's some success in sharing the love, God's love.
Absolutely. If I just want to answer that, Giro, and then I'm gonna stop talking. I promise.
Go ahead, Rosemary. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
No, so yes, and thank you again for a beautiful observation. There is a poster in the church that we attend here in Baton Rouge that says, it's about Christ in the city, and it's a kind of new approach to ministering to the homeless people among us in the city. And it has a man sitting there with this cardboard sign in the image, and it says homeless but human. And I want to write over it every single time, and or even cross out homeless but and just put human. And then the second thing, and this is kind of why I got so involved in the sort of the Jewish look at what Charles de Foucauld was living during this experience, because he didn't take a whole lot of Judaism away from it with him. He was no fan of the Jews, and that's been a big point of contention in the celebration of his work in Morocco. But is that he became very familiar with the Old Testament scriptures. And one of them that especially speaks to me is the book of Esther, that, for who is to say that it is not for such a time as this that you have come here, like that he had to be that other in order to see others as not others, if that makes sense.
Thank you for sharing, John. Your pain is our pain as well. And I was simply going to say, since I'm not seeing many hands up, are we not all objectified in some way? When you take a look at the very high-paced, rapidly evolving daily lives that you and I live in, where we barely have time to be, and we have so much emphasis on having, are we not objects sometimes? I see a hand here from Father Joseph. And I also see a hand here from Sue Williamson. Sue, would you like to pose your question or make your comment? Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to both speakers, and it's very interesting to have a literary perspective as well, because that's more my sort of interest. But Kathy is always very wonderful, I have to say. What struck me was who is our Tuareg? Who are our Tuaregs? And it ties up a lot with the work that Charles de Foucauld did with the Muslims. We worked with Syrian refugees here, quite a few of us, and I think some of them now have status to stay, but the nightmare of people trying to come to this country, often dying on boats on the Channel, is definitely our Tuareg, because people just don't welcome them. We're trying to be a little island separate from Europe. And I think we have to think very carefully about the work we can do with people trying to come to this country who are in great need, coming from war zones. And I don't just mean Ukraine. I don't know what other people think about that as well.
Very relevant comments, Sue. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I am told that Father Joseph has his hand up. I apologize for naming you one more time. Yes, Xavier from Brussels. The microphone is yours, brother.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm quite impressed by the research that's been done by Kath and Rosemary on these accounts on the life of Charles de Foucauld, which is so varied. What I remember, obviously, is what Antoine Châtelard used to say, that we remember Charles de Foucauld as a man who is such an extraordinary life in so many ways and places and changes. But what he was pointing out was to live ordinary life, which is the life of Nazareth, which doesn't mean to move, just to live with your own family and neighbors and work there and relate to God. What I thought was quite interesting was the Rosemary's research on the Reconnaissance of Moroc, because I had the chance of reading that book a few years ago when I was in Beni Abbès. I think it was a practical choice. Rather than being scorched in the sun, I was comfortably in the house of the Fraternité and reading that book. And what struck me was the insecurity of Charles de Foucauld through his long travel with the rabbi to be dependent on hospitality and to have to change and to rely on his contacts in France to go and fetch some cash from a bigger place. I mean, that was quite striking. And his experience, which obviously changed his life, of being, like Rosemary was saying, called to, being looked down, from whom, you know, this man who had been a soldier, that was something that prepared him for a better life afterwards. That's what I wanted to say.
Merci, Xavier. Thank you very much. There's a wonderful comment here by Joanna Udall. Would you like to speak on your, state what you wrote in your chat, or would you like me to say it? Perhaps
I don't mind. I've unmuted. Just to say, this was on a notice in the, there is a place, a room, which was a place refugees could, and migrants could come and use the facilities. And it was a wonderful poster written in Arabic saying, I'm a person before I'm a migrant. And insan and Qubli al-Mahajja. Qubli al-Mahajja.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you very much. There's another hand here. Yes, go ahead, please. Emiko Sukawa.
Yes, okay. It's Kathy here.
Go ahead, little sister.
Hello. I just want to say I had a time of quiet recently and the opportunity to do quite a lot of reading on Charles. And I read from cover to cover the big book of Soriso and all the books of Chatla and so forth and so on. And I really got very close to Brother Charles. But I think what impressed me was his aristocratic background, the influence of his family, the military formation that Rosemary also brought out in a small way, and the whole colonial impact on the life of Charles. But I think the whole time I was asking myself the question, why is it you're so attracted to this man? What do you want to follow in his life? And I just think the burning question each time kept coming back to me. It's his passionate love for Jesus. He's just madly in love with Jesus. And I think that's just what I would like to be as well. Mm-hmm. And I think also to take into account the conditions of his death were really unglorious. Sometimes they're mooshed up in books, but it was absolutely awful. You know, a lot of his life was really very insignificant. But what is it that attracts us to him, you know? And I think it's this allowing the Spirit to have taken over his life with all these limitations in a certain sense of colonialism, his family background and all that. But he let Jesus take hold of him to become another Jesus. I think that's what I hold, and that's what I want to share.
Radically enrooted in the Gospels and bringing Jesus to others.
Yeah.
Thank you, little sister. Thank you so much.
Chiro.
Yes, Moira.
Joseph has had his hand up lots. Please find him. Joseph, can you find him?
I've called upon him 3 times and I do not see him on my screen.
What do I do? Shall I start talking or what?
Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I've got the kind of patience which we have in the Mediterranean, so no problem. Thanks for your input. But what I would like to share with you is I've always been thinking about it. What really attracted me to this figure of Charles de Foucauld. I'm kind of worried about how to reach out to the younger generation around us. And I would be including most of the young priests. It seemed that they would be knowing something about this man, but they hardly think about taking up his challenges and his kind of life, you know. Well, it's my challenge in my life. This is my challenge in my life. I don't know what to do about it. Perhaps this might be something for all the fraternities all over the world to be thinking about it. How are we going to reach out to these people? Again, I would repeat, please, to the young priests. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Father Joseph, first for your great patience, and second for your wise words. And hopefully next Sunday, we'll have the opportunity of digging into that question. It's a painful one, but there's one with a path of great hope opening up before us.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If you are all willing at this point, I believe all the hands being raised. My sister Moira, I look at you with great hopes. Have I missed anyone? I don't think so. Can you confirm?
I'm just checking, Giro.
There are many people. It's all good. It's all good.
Yes, Laura Lee. Can you see somebody, Chiro? Laura Lee, little sister.
Yes.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Laura Lee. How are you? Small
I'm
world.
very well. I'm very, very happy to be here with all of
Pleasure
you.
is ours. Go ahead. Brief comment.
I just wanted to ask a question, whether the speakers will have this text in print somewhere that we can hold on to it and reread.
I can assure you that this meeting is being recorded and it will be uploaded on a YouTube channel very shortly for everyone to view for free. Whether the speakers are willing to share their written texts that has not been discussed, we will reconvene with you all with specific instructions if that is a possibility.
Yes, please consider it.
Thank you, little sister. Great to see you again.
Thank you.
You're getting younger by the day.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Our journey has only started. We have a few more Sundays where we will be reconvening, sharing, and walking on that path towards Rome together very proudly. At this point, I call upon our brother, Father Lenny Tai, for a concluding prayer. Your microphone, brother.
Lord Jesus Christ, you have told us where 2 or 3 are gathered together in your name, that you would be there in the midst of them. And even now in our international community of people, you stand strangely and beautifully in our midst. And you are here because we love you. We love you, Lord Jesus, our beloved brother and our Lord, as our own brother Charles loved to call you. How grateful we are to call brother Charles de Foucauld our inspiration and motivation to want to deepen our life with you, Lord, and to live more than ever within you. Our brother Charles has touched each of us so uniquely, but has revealed your sacred heart as the tangible love of the Father, and given us a tongue of fire for love of all your holy people. We are yours, a sinful people, washed in the blood of the Lamb. It is now that we come to you, Saint Charles de Foucauld, for you call us ever more deeply to love, ever more deeply to be a living sacrament of the Eucharist, and loving those who are the least in the sight of a power-hungry world. May we cry the gospel with our lives and make this world a true kingdom of love. We pray with you, the Viscount Charles de Foucauld, with Blessed Charles of Jesus, with Brother Marie Alberic, with Rabbi Joseph Alleman, with Charles of Jesus, and whatever you call yourself. We pray with you now and ask us, as we bless ourselves, as we bless one another, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, as they live within us forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
On behalf of our small working group, thank you all very much for having attended this virtual meeting. We are terribly very grateful. It's a great joy for the community to meet, to embrace this heritage that we've been given, and to look forward to it being unfolded in the years to come. Please note that our next meeting is next Sunday, May 8th, via Zoom, the very same Zoom link that you've been given. Please note that this meeting is recorded and it will be uploaded very shortly on a specialized YouTube channel. Please stay tuned for these details. On these final words, we wish you a great and blessed Sunday. Enjoy your week, and may our journey till next Sunday be there. Have a good day.
Sharing, no? When she said, wait a minute now,
Yeah, she was talking about homeless people.
I am a person before being a migrant.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yeah. Okay, you are that.
So should we leave?
Yeah. Oh, like it was your name. I know that is. Oh, I would like to. Anyway.
Father Assi, how lovely to see you. This is little Sister Kathy from the United States. I knew you in Rome many, many years ago.
Kathy, thank you very much for writing your book, which we translated in Pakistan. Thank you. I wanted to say hello to you, but I was just waiting for the chance. Where are you nowadays?
In the United States. United
Where?
States. In the United States.
Yes. Okay, United States. Nice seeing you.
See you too.
Thank you. Thank you. Little sister Anila, how are you? Little sister Anila. Little sister Anila, can you hear my voice? Little Sister Anila.
Ah, yes. Yes, Father G.
Oh. How are you? How
I
are you?
am well. I don't know if you see me because I did not put the
No,
TV
your
on.
camera is off, but
Yes,
I read your name. How are you?
Nice. Yes, I will show you my my face if the camera wants to open it. Impossible. It's not possible, Father G, because I am in a
Okay,
park.
it's fine.
So I am very,
Where
very
are you?
happy. I am at Aix-en-Provence, south of France, Father G.
South of France. Okay.
South, yes. And I am in
Do you
recollection.
have my-
Yeah, I am in recollection today, and just Kathy has sent me the link, so I was able to follow half of it because I did not manage well, but I was able to ask a young guy in the park, and he helped me to be able to hear. I am with my
I said hello.
smartphone. Yes, hello,
Just now I said hello to Sister
Kathy. Yes,
Kathy. Right.
yes, she is my
So
friend too.
can you send me your email?
Oh yes, I will. I have still your mail. I am sorry not to have written to you, but I am happy to meet you, and I will send you soon. Cheer up.
Next Sunday I will be absent because I will be in Quetta, and I will be
Yes.
celebrating Mass this time in Quetta.
Ah yes, very good, very good. So I will be in communion with you. When are you going to Rome, Father Assi? When are you going to Rome?
Maybe if I get chance, I will come to see you in August.
Ah yes, and when? You don't know.
Month of August.
Okay, then we'll see. Very good.
But I will write to you well ahead of time.
Okay, very good. I am happy. God bless you. I will meet
Thank you.
Sisirani. Yes, I will meet Sisirani beginning of June.
Okay. Give her my greetings.
Yes, I will. Very good. Salam, Father G.
Salam.
Very good.
Now Nargas Hira is also online. Nargas Hira.
Ah, yes, she is now online.
Just now she came in. Nargas?
Hello, Narges. I can't
I
hear.
think they will close the site.
Yes.
She's
Anyway,
just trying to come in, get in.
Yes, we had the chance to to chat. It was good. Oh, nice. I don't know what.
Nargas Hira is trying to connect.
Oh, but she might.
But I
She
think they
doesn't
will
manage.
close the site.
Yes. Anyway, it was very nice. Beautiful.
So give my greetings to all whom you meet and whom I know.
Yes, I will. Certainly. And Nirmala, she's and Cecilia, I will send to Brussels. I don't know why she was not here. Cecilia.
Okay.
Okay, God bless you.
Thank you, sister. Thank you, little
Thank
sister.
you. Shukriya
Thank you.
बहुत शुक्रिया.
Shukriya. Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.